Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. I'm a men's dating, relationship, and intimacy coach. I help men live better lives, better relationships, and more exciting dating lives. It's a big part of my work is not just working on the love and the intimacy and the relationships, but also getting involved in one's purpose, one's goals, one's dreams, and one's hopes to create. And this episode is an episode I really enjoyed recording. I'm joined by Natalie Lee. She's an author, content creator, mother, woman extraordinaire. She does so many things which she talks about in the episode, and she's so multidimensional. And it's fascinating to hear her story. And she talks very openly and vulnerably about her own experiences with sex, sexual shame. She really opens up and really talks. I'm really deeply grateful to her for that, because I know that these topics are not all easy to speak about. She really, talks about her experience, and I talk about some of the experiences of men in this same topic. And we talk a lot about how we can bridge that gap between men and women. And something I'm seeing increasingly is we live in these silos of men having their opinions about women and women having their opinions about men. And I'm not saying that their opinions are not based on facts and of events, but what's often missing on both sides in the healing process is understanding more of the other side, like having a compassionate understanding, and listening from a point of view of not listening to challenge or defend, but listening to understand and feel. It's definitely something that I want to probably speak into a lot more in the future. Because I think as men, we can learn a lot from listening to women's stories, their experiences of the pain that men have caused them, right? And then I think the vice versa is also true. There's also a lot of value for women to hear about the pain men experience and also the pain men have experienced from women. And I feel like, this is part of the most important work we can do on this planet, because it really bridges the gap between two genders that are very much the same, that have experienced pain and just communicate differently due to the way society tells us how we need to be and how we shouldn't be. And I've just seen from my conversations that we're not that different, and we just need to open our hearts and listen to each other. And that goes to both sides. So this is a really good episode. You learn a lot. We also talk towards the end about some practices that you can do to heal, to heal the pain, the trauma that you've experienced. We go through quite a number of practices that you can take on. And these are things that you can do at very low cost. And when I say low cost, I mean zero cost. Zero cost healing tools that everyone can access and do. You don't need to go and see some shaman. You don't need to drink any plant medicine. You don't necessarily need to fly halfway around the world. These are tools that you can do at home right now. Like literally you can get up and listen to this and do it straight away. We talk a lot about, how we can speak in the episode. We talk about how we can speak about sex, the labels that we put on young girls from a very young age, We talk about Natalie's, what sparked her interest in talking about sex and sexual shame publicly. We talk about sharing sexual experiences, sexual violence as well, against women and the pain that causes. And we talk a little about men and our emotional expression and why, crying and sharing can be very difficult for us. So it's a very, very full episode. I highly recommend it to men, especially, because you get to hear a woman's experience, really up close and personal. I have a couple of announcements in terms of what I've got coming up. In May, on the 15th, I'm running a workshop with my partner also, which is called The Foundations of a Conscious Relationship. That is going to be a free workshop that you can come to, free, no cost, doesn't cost you anything. Even if you can't make the date, there'll be a recording, so you can grab that afterwards as well. And in that, we're going to take you through the foundational parts of building a conscious relationship, the various aspects of creating a passionate and exciting and fun and connected and supportive relationship, and sex-filled as well, because I think that's a really important thing for us all. We all want to have more sex, which is quite consistent across the people that I work with as well. So that's on the 15th of May. Also, I've got a men's program that I'm running in June and July. It's going to be 8 weeks. It's going to be 8 calls with me and another group of men. And quite a number of those, a third of those have already been booked up. So if this is something you're interested in, please let me know. We're going to be exploring the topics of masculinity, masculine leadership, and how we can bring kind of positive and healthy masculine leadership in our own lives and into the world. We're going to do a bunch of embodiment practices to, boost confidence and self-belief and so forth, as well as some sexual practices that I'll give you to take away. And we're talking about sex, tantric sex, sexuality, connection, how we can connect better with our partners, the women we date, dating as well. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in there. So it's a wonderful way to do some work with me, but also to do work with other men. And I see this as something that a lot of men who listen to the podcast and contact me is that they're struggling to find like-minded men. And this is the place. You're going to find like-minded men who listen to the podcast or who've coached with me, who are interested in this sort of content that you've probably been listening to for a while. But that's enough about me, enough about what I've got going on. Now it's time to get into this episode and enjoy. So, ladies and gentlemen, back for another wonderful episode. And I know how much people love to hear and talk about sex. So I listen, I hear, I see the numbers, I see the downloads, and I hear the comments that people make. And I know that when it comes to sex, we carry a lot that isn't ours. We carry a lot that we've been given to us by other people, the world around us. And even, some of it comes from places we don't even know, myths, made up things, and all sorts of places. And I think it's always really valuable for us to do the work to kind of unpick, look at, and find out, but also to hear other people's experiences, because often with this sort of thing, this sort of shame that we carry, we think it's just us. We think we're alone in the world with our shame around our bodies and our sexuality and our sexual expression. And it's very far from the truth. So today I have with me Natalie Lee. She's a content creator and an author of a book that's coming out very, very soon. How are you doing, Natalie?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on here. Really excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I've followed your work for a little while and reading your posts and enjoying your openness and your vulnerability to your own journey. So one of the questions I like to start with everybody is just to ask, how did you come to do the work that you do today? Because I imagine your journey is filled with turns and twists.
It came out of boredom, I would say. I was on maternity leave, having just sort of stopped being a midwife. I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I knew that I didn't want to go back to that because I was really struggling with the shift work, really struggling managing the family, with very little support, really. And, like the shifts are all over the place. No one wants to look after children when you got to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I really struggled with that. My husband worked really long hours, so he couldn't really support me with the childcare and stuff. So yeah, I knew that I didn't want to go back to work. I was pregnant and I was just like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, I need to have something to stimulate my brain, because nappies and, you know, bedtime stories, I love, but they are not as fulfilling as one might believe before you have children. I knew that I had to do something I was passionate about in order for it to be sustainable. I also wanted to have financial freedom, and also just the freedom to be able to travel as well. I love traveling. I didn't want to be really restricted in terms of my career. So that's why I chose midwifery, because of that, because I knew I could get a job in anywhere being a midwife. So that's why I went into this. And it started off as like a fashion blog, but it's definitely evolved into so much more than that. It changes depending on what life stage I'm at. And yeah, it's led to so many things, like talking sort of gigs, you know, I don't even know what you call them now. When when you go to events and you stand up and talk, that's what I get paid to do sometimes. I've also written a book, which is coming out in June, just for a quick plug. It's called Feeling Myself. And I have done podcasts. I work with loads of brands. I do loads of different things. I think today, I mean, definitely the circles I move in, it's really rare to meet somebody that just has the one job. Loads of us have loads of different sort of facets to our career, which I find like that really works with my personality. I need interest, I need variety. Otherwise, it's just not going to work long term for me.
I have to resonate with that. It's enjoyable to do many different things, because we're human beings. We're multi-dimensional beings. I don't think we're here just to like have this one career doing this one job for 40, 50 years in the way that maybe some of our parents would have. There's so much to experience, so much to see, you know, the travel, but there's also so many different parts of us that vocationally can be expressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about what I do now. I can also follow tangents. I can also, you know, reinvent myself, and I don't feel restricted to only talk about one thing, which is great. I do know that lots of people do try to pigeonhole you and try to sort of like, oh no, hold on, are you talking about fashion or are you talking about sex? I'm like, well, I'm actually doing both, because, you know, that we don't just do one thing, one or the other. It's, you know, so yeah.
No, I definitely agree. For much of my recent career, people are like, oh, so you're a dating coach, you help people with dating. And I go, yeah, kind of. But I don't talk about dating that much with people. They're like, what do you mean you don't talk? You're a dating coach. I was like, well, I help people with dating, relationships, intimacy. And then, you know, inside of that, there's a lot of conversation I have about masculinity, and then, you know, goals and what people really want, self-awareness and emotions. I was like, those are kind of the areas I cover. And people usually look at me blankly and go, oh, so you're not really a dating coach then?
Well, yeah, they're all interlinked. So you should be able to go freely wherever the interest follows, and that will change over time. And I'm very, you know, supportive of allowing people that freedom to not be boxed in.
Mm. Yeah, because it's the problem of our society, I think, is this needing to put people in a box, for whether it be for comfortability, whether it be for labeling, whether it be for, you know, just so we can say that's who someone is. That is, so we can just say they are that one thing. But actually, really, like you said, it's very restrictive. And and it doesn't allow people to blossom into the really deeply multi-dimensional beings that we are, that can talk about multiple different subjects in given one time and really serve people by having those sorts of conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
So what sparked your interest to speak publicly around sex and shame and your own journey with that?
Oh, good question. What sparked that interest? I think just a natural evolution of really sort of digging deep, really looking within, healing. I had to do a lot of self-analysis, and through that process, you know, I realized that I was carrying shame before I'd even entered the birth canal. And shame is so intrinsically linked with gender. I believe that women carry a lot more shame than men around sex. Not saying that men don't carry any shame at all, but as soon as you're assigned a gender, there is such a lot of expectation, social conditioning that comes along with that gender, and sex, and especially sexual shame, is really inherent in women, I think, or put on women. So yeah, it was just about sort of going really deep and analyzing where a lot of my issues came from. And I had a very traumatic early childhood experience, and a lot of it stemmed from there. So I think that just got me on the subject of talking about sexual shame and really trying to overcome it. My book that I wrote over lockdown was like one of the most traumatic things I've ever had to do. But it was really useful. I went through such a process with it. And I ended up having some really important conversations with people that I love, and it deepened our relationships. And I went through a big journey, a very, very big journey with it. So I'm grateful for that, even though it was fucking painful.
And I imagine that it was very cathartic to put those thoughts, those experiences into words. And did it also give you that sense of being able to let go of some of that shame you've been carrying by putting it onto paper? And it was like looking at it very black and white, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the thing is one of my issues, which is deeply ingrained from childhood, has been that I didn't feel like my voice was ever heard. So this book was an expression to really let my throat chakra sing and make me feel like I just had that outlet to express myself. And ultimately, I felt a lot calmer. I felt a lot more satisfied because I didn't feel so restricted anymore. You know, when you don't speak about things, that weighs really heavy on you, especially if it's something that is attached to shame. That heaviness you carry around like a fucking really heavy backpack. So the book enabled me to put all of those things that I carried around that made me feel like I wasn't a good person, that I wasn't worthy. It made me put my backpack down, and yeah, enabled me to feel a lot lighter and a lot freer.
Because the backpack analogy is a really good one. It's often used in circles talking about things like the shadow. We put things in our backpack constantly for our lives. And as you said, we're born with a backpack already. We come out of the womb. If we are assigned to be women, girls, then instantly there's this idea of how we're going to move through the world and what it means to be a woman, to be a young girl, how we're meant to sit and stand and speak and respond, and how much we're allowed to speak and how much we're allowed to respond. And then we move into adolescence and we start to have certain urges and thoughts around sex and intimacy and that sort of thing. And then the world starts to tell us, maybe even before that point, like what we shouldn't be expressing and how we shouldn't be moving through the world, and labeling us certain things if we choose to express our sexuality in a certain way, which are not often useful to us. And I guess what I'm thinking here is that why, I guess that's a huge question there. It's like, why do we so quickly start putting these labels on young girls? Almost as soon as they can start to stand and walk, there becomes this kind of pushing down on, this stamping on so quickly.
Well, it's a form of control. I believe it's a form of control. And if you don't make someone feel good about themselves, you have that edge over them. And I think, unfortunately, we live in a society where girls and women are manipulated and are made to feel less than in order to keep them in their place, because, they don't want us to be CEOs. They don't want us to be the prime minister of countries. They want us to be thinking about how thin we are and how many wrinkles we've got and how much our bum wobbles and, just really fucking stupid, basic stuff that really doesn't matter, that is just part of our bodies. It takes up so much brain space that we actually don't have the capacity to think about the really important stuff going on in society. So for me, the only thing I can possibly think of is that it is a form of control. Now, I'm sure it's not been a conscious decision, but it's very, very powerful.
And it's incredible how, I think it's difficult to speak of this shame around body and sex without really talking about religion and the role that religion places and has for thousands of years, because we have books which start to having been indoctrinating humans around feeling shame around sex from, we look at Adam and Eve, and it starts with Adam and Eve, isn't it? It's like she fucked up. Yeah, that's where it started, right?
It does. I mean, religion has so much to answer for. Oh God, I mean, that's a whole nother fucking podcast. But yeah, it's bad. Religion, I believe, is really destructive. Although I'm very spiritual. I definitely believe in there being more than us, but actual organized religion, I feel, is the originator of so much shit that we carry around with us. And again, going back to that control, religion has always tried to control us, has tried to tell us that this is what we should be doing. You should be getting married, you should be having children, you should be abstaining from sex. And, all of these things they make you feel like you're going to go to hell if you don't adhere to their rules. So, the consequences that they preach about are so catastrophic that has been embedded in our psyche, and they're so powerful and far-reaching that it's really hard to extrapolate ourselves from that rhetoric.
Even if we're not actively part of religion, or our families aren't actively part of religion,
we're still affected.
Yeah, because it's really deeply embedded in our legal system, for instance. You know, the origins of our legal system is religion, is you know, in this country, well, in the UK, is the Bible. And it's interesting, I did a podcast with a young lady, and she had gone through, she lived as part of Pentecostal church, which was interesting because I also went to Pentecostal church when I was a kid, and she's from Italy and Germany. And she said, you know, she goes, there were times where she would want to run certain things as a young girl, and she was told, no, you need to give that to a boy. Or, you know, she would wear certain things, she'd be like, no, you can't wear that thing. And she'd come to this realization, she was just like, anything enjoyable is a sin in some way, and I shouldn't be doing it. But yeah, if a man does it, it's okay. He's allowed to go and do those things. Yeah.
And can you imagine growing up like that? It's so restrictive, you know. It's just not a nice way to live. And also, you know, right next to you, somebody else who wears trousers or might wear trousers, is getting to do all those things that you want to do. It's like fucking torture. It's awful.
We would have had to watch that happen. And I'm interested in, you know, because I remember from my own childhood, the first time this happened to me, when sex was talked about in front of me, and I maybe asked a question or two, or, you know, I said something I shouldn't have done, and I was kind of ashamed for that. And I'm wondering for you, if you can remember your first memory of being shamed by someone else around sex or sexual desire.
I mean, again, it's just so hard to extrapolate the shame from just being female. It's really difficult. But can I remember a specific incident? I mean, I think probably the earliest childhood memory of the traumatic event that happened, that was really kind of, I won't go into the details here because you can't get that in my book, and I don't want to go into the details at the moment. But that kind of, it led to like going to the police station, and there was a lot of it being pushed under the carpet, that it wasn't talked about. It was silenced, basically, and that can only lead you to feel some shame around that. When things that, you know, I'm such a open and honest person now, probably because of my experience. And I'm sure people think there's a lot of TMI going on all the time. But, you know, it's because I don't want my children to feel any shame about talking about sex or masturbation or anything, or, you know, having desires. I don't want that to be the case. So I think that was the first real fucking massive explosion of, and I was only 4 at the time, explosion of a situation that I knew was not to be talked about, that was shameful, that was hidden away, basically.
We kind of tell children, or we model to children, that they shouldn't talk about something. We just intrinsically think we've done something wrong, right?
Yes.
And no one says, oh, I'm asking you not to talk about this, not because you've done something wrong, but because someone else has done something wrong. And, you know, we don't want to, for whatever reason, make them feel bad or whatever. But by silencing, by not talking about these things, the child, as a sensible, logical thought process, thinks, well, if I'm being told to be quiet, which I'm often probably told to do anyway in other areas of life, I can equate that to then I must have said something wrong or done something wrong. So once we've got, I have done something wrong, easily leads to I am wrong, I am bad, which is shame. You know, guilt is often this, oh, I've done something bad. Shame is, this is how I see it, shame is like, I am bad in some way. And by silencing children, even if this, you know, for being inquisitive about sex, like just asking some questions like, where do babies come from? You know, the number of people I know, I never had this conversation in my family, because when sex used to come on the TV, it was just like, and I know this for a lot of people, magically the TV would change channel and the conversation would switch to something else. And everyone would sit and almost like, now I look back and it's almost like my mum would like wipe her brow and we'd all pretend it didn't happen. But by doing that, you're continually reinforcing this idea that sex is in some way shameful and should somewhere be hidden, and one should not have any expressions of sex or sexuality. And as children, we just internalize that because we keep getting this message from our parents, the people around us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I almost go the opposite. When sex comes up on our TV, I'm like, girls, this is brilliant. Right, let's talk about this. And they're like, oh, mum, can you please stop? So they're embarrassed of me, and I don't care. Because I know one day they're going to be pleased that I keep like bleating on about how they, you know, I like to talk about consent a lot. I like them to talk about their ownership of their bodies, and pleasure is theirs to take and enjoy. And yeah, I know I annoy them, but I think it's worth the annoyance.
Definitely, because I guess you almost maybe this is something you're consciously doing, is counterbalancing the general messaging they're getting from the world that it is somehow shameful. And if we don't consciously counterbalance things in that way, in the same way, if we want to change our mindset, we have to consciously shift it into a different gear to start to move to a different place. You're consciously saying, hey, there's this thing, and outside of here, maybe people shame this thing, but in this house, there's no shame here. Be free with yourself.
You're right about it being a conscious decision, because I was the same growing up. You know, we didn't speak about sex. That was not a topic in our household. Even now, I would struggle to talk about sex with my mum, even though, was it last Christmas or the Christmas before, I bought her a vibrator for Christmas. But still, I would struggle doing a face-to-face chat, I think, with my mum and sex, because we just haven't had that relationship. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to consciously overcome my embarrassment and my awkwardness around sex. And maybe I've gone a bit too far the other way, but you know, I have to do that in order to overcome it.
And I'm interested in your Christmas present from your mother. I think it's a very bold Christmas present.
I actually bought a vibrator for my mum and my two sisters, because I think I came to masturbation quite late in life, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, why are we not taught this as soon as we can talk? Why is this not part of the curriculum? I do feel like female masturbation is much more attached to shame than male masturbation. You might have a different opinion, but I definitely do. You know, I think in sort of sex education and stuff, everyone knows that boys wank, right? Everyone. but no one talked about girls doing it. And I remember kind of like little instances of it as a kid, like humping teddies and stuff like that, not understanding what the fuck I was doing, but just knowing that it felt good. And then, you know, people would say things at school like, if you touch yourself and stuff, you'll go blind, and just really weird, odd things like that, that you just, as a kid, you don't even question. It's just something that you have inbuilt. And I definitely carried this for a very, very long time, this whole shame attached to wanking. And I remember, you know, when I first really started to consciously practice self-pleasure, I would be like looking around because I thought like, I'm going to get caught in a minute. Like literally there's going to be armed guards that are going to burst into the fucking room and are going to like take me down, because my shame was so strong that I thought I was doing something wrong. It was really, you know, it was hidden. It wasn't talked about. It was just something that I like squirreled away and did, but felt a huge amount of disgust about doing. And then when I had children, you know, having children makes you see things very differently. I suddenly was seeing everything through fresh eyes, through my children's eyes. And that made me question everything that I do. Like, why am I feeling the shame around masturbation? Why am I buying a cream that says I shouldn't have wrinkles? Why am I standing on the scales making myself feel like absolute shit because I've put on a couple of pounds? Why am I doing this? Is this something that comes from deep within me, or is it something that has been put on me? And that is what I started questioning when I had children, something that I'm fighting strongly against, those social constructs and norms that are put on us. You know, it is a bit like fighting fires. We get the messages through every single angle. So yeah, I'm just trying to be that voice of contrast and say, actually, you don't have to grow up just wanting to get married and have children. You don't have to dream of this big, you know, beautiful, fancy wedding day. There is a lot more to life than that. So, yeah.
And those are big questions to be asking oneself, you know, in the world, when you start asking those big questions and you start saying to other people that you're asking those questions. Sometimes those people then go, why are you asking these questions? Stop asking these questions, because you kind of cause them to feel uncomfortable, because if someone's asking a question in front of you, your brain can't but help but ponder the same thing, you know, like, why am I doing these things? It's like, I mainly work with men, and men have a slightly mirror experience. It's like, when it comes to masturbation, a lot of guys hear the same things. You're going to go blind. I never forget that one.
They do.
Someone was going to tell me when I was about 12 years old, said, oh, if you wanking makes you go blind. I remember being like, oh, I don't want to lose my eyesight. I really like playing football. And that you get hair on the back of your hands. I remember that one as well. Yeah. It might fall off. I remember that one as well. And it's, everyone knows that boys wank, but yet there's still a shame that men carry around so lot. This is still hiding. It's the same thing. We do it, you know, in the privacy, you know, quickly. You know, I work with a lot of men who have erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. And it's something that we condition our bodies into, because we wank quickly in the bathroom or in our bedroom, hoping that our parents won't knock on the door at some point, because we don't want to be caught. And then we bring that same pace and speed and stress and anxiety into sex as we grow up, which means that we have terrible sex, basically. So it's a kind of mirroring on those sides. But and I definitely say this, the shame is slightly less, definitely, from my experience of the women I've known and talked to and I've dated over the years. And then when it comes to the life stuff that we're talking about, men get trapped into this materialism of like, I'm only a real man if I'm making 6-7 figures. I'm only a real man if I have a really big, fast car. I'm only a real man if I have really big muscles. And, you know, we have this idea of midlife crisis for a lot of men, right? Of they get to 30 something, 40 something, and then they like quit their job, buy a Porsche or whatever. And I've started to see more and more this midlife crisis is like a midlife awakening, actually, because it's like a point and going, wait a minute, do I want all this shit? I'm now, I don't know, C-suite guy, head of finance, head of whatever. And it's like, they stop, and I speak to a lot of guys who get to this point and they go, but I'm not very happy here. Like, why have I done all these things? I've done all these things. And they realize I've done all these things because the world told me if I did these things, I'd be happy. And the world fucking lied to me.
The world lied to you. And that's the thing, you didn't question it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get back to that inner voice that's been stifled, that's been shut down, that's been told is too much, it's been told is not enough. I'm trying to really, really dig deep and find her, because our voices and our connection to ourselves is so muddied and hidden under so many layers that it's really difficult to unpack. But I mean, it sounds like the work that you're doing is great. And you know, the stuff I say, most of the time I'm preaching to the converted, you know. A lot of women feel like this too. But more men need to be on side. More men need to be questioning. More men need to be really sort of breaking free from the toxic masculinity. And yeah, as you said, all of that stuff that has been put on them in order for them to feel like a man. If we don't have the other half of the population on the same kind of brainwave, then nothing's going to change. Nothing at all is going to change. So I really like the idea that you're working with men and hopefully just enabling them, giving them permission to question things, because that curiosity, I can't say that word. I've got a bit of a lisp, I think. That curiosity is what is really magical and beautiful, and that's where the real growth happens. So yeah, it's just about really promoting that to men and women.
And it is such important work that we do, and just sharing our own experiences, because by sharing our own experience, it starts to be, someone hears that and goes, someone else is feeling that way. Someone else is asking those questions. I'm not alone, because I think that's the feeling we often have, is like, oh, I'm alone with my shame. I'm alone with this fear of, you know, if I masturbate, if pleasuring myself is bad in some way. And when we hear someone else say, no, you should spend, you know, a few hours a week self-pleasuring, and this is how you can do it. You can do all these lovely breathing techniques. You could grab a mirror and look at yourself as you do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's okay. We get a message that's contrary to everything we've been told, which is like, my desire is okay. What I want to do is okay and acceptable. And that little message once in of itself is transformative to somebody.
Oh God, yeah, it absolutely is. I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And the more that we can spread this message, the better. I don't see that, you know, it sounds like we have some similar sort of processes. And I've never really thought about it from a man's perspective before, because why. There's lots of reasons why. I'm going to be really honest and say that, you know, as a woman, I feel very distrustful of men because I've been hurt by so many men in the past. So there's almost like a kind of barrier up in terms of how I relate to men and in terms of how I communicate with men. So I'm glad you're doing the work and not me. But I do that. I guess what I'm, you know, I've never actually had a podcast interview, and I've done lots and lots and lots of podcast interviews with a man. So this is really quite novel for me. And I was wondering, I probably came into it thinking about it a little bit more than I would, because I knew that there was those sort of barriers that I had with men because of my past experiences, and still a lot more healing to happen there. But just hearing you speak enabled me to sort of visualize that the things that I'm talking about for women, you know, you mentioned about like looking in the mirror whilst masturbating, breathing, mindfulness, and all of that. I have completely discounted the male experience, even though I know intellectually that it's really important. In terms of any sort of empathy or anything, because I think a lot of women are quite distrustful of men and they've been hurt by lots of men. So therefore we talk about the patriarchy, and we talk about basically how bad men are quite a lot. But what are we doing about communicating with them and trying to get them on our side instead of demonizing them? That's a really important realization that is progressing throughout this conversation. So I am going to have a think about that and how I can communicate better with men. And I think, and I'm divorced now. So I think since my divorce, I just don't want to be around men at all. But I think, you know, that clearly shows me that there's still a lot of healing that needs to go on there. And yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk, and I'm just really pleased about the kind of stuff that you're talking about and how it is similar to the female experience. It's not completely it's not to be disregarded. It has to be acknowledged. And also there are things that we can take from both of our experiences and learn from.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really beautiful. Thank you. I see, you know, I interact with a lot of women through Instagram and also through my podcast. And I grew up in a house of women. I've got 3 sisters. I grew up with my mum and my 3 sisters. So the female experience was very vivid in my life. I did a lot of probably far too much dating in my 20s. And I did a lot of listening, of being like, you know, how's your life? What's happened to you? And it's probably when I first started to hear about a lot of the sexual violence that men perpetrate against women in my early 20s. And it was a real shock for me, you know. And so I kind of really absorbed a lot of that and heard a lot of that and understood. And as I've started to work with men more and more, what I've started to see is that there's like a chasm that sits between men and women. I feel media plays a lot of part in this because they profit from this chasm. And we throw a lot of blame over the chasm. But the real work and the real healing for both sides is when we can build a bridge between the two and speak from a place of empathy and compassion for each other's experience, and realize that we're not actually that different. We have the same pain, but we just express it differently in the world. And when we can understand that, we would have so much more understanding of each other, and a lot of the pain and how we hurt each other would start to fall away. That's my feeling.
Absolutely. I think we do. And it comes from a place on being able to communicate as equals. I think often women feel quite undermined and patronized by men. I'm going to give you an example, because I jumped into your live last night and you what I came in, so I might be taking this completely out of context, but I came in towards the end, and you were talking about having difficult conversations with women, and the person you were talking to talked about like buttering them up and buying them flowers before having that difficult conversation. Well, you can imagine that really fucking annoyed me because that is so patronizing, and it just makes women feel like you don't need to buy me flowers to have a difficult conversation with me. You just need to relate to me as an equal and have those difficult conversations. We're not so different. We're able to understand complex and difficult concepts, and just be curious with each other, ask each other questions, and just, like you said, really listen. That's the most important things when you want to relate to somebody, not buying them flowers. So I was like there was steam coming out of my ears when I heard that. So I thought it was really useful to bring up today.
And I definitely see and empathize with this way in which men have this idea that we have to be, it's almost like we're told we have to treat women with kid gloves, that they're so gentle, like porcelain. We don't want to damage them and hurt them. And I guess maybe this is where my personal experience is very different. I come from a family of, my mother's Jamaican, she raised 4 children on her own, there was no need to speak gently with my mother. There still isn't,
I love that.
She probably speaks quite gently to me. I always remember a story of one of my friends years ago. He said to me one day, he's like, I'm far more scared of your mother than I am of my own. And I was like, yeah, I'm the same. But I do think this is an important point, is like, women don't need to be treated with kid gloves. They're not incapable. They're not weak. They're incredibly strong individuals. And I think this narrative that we get taught from young age, really, isn't it? It's like, the men and women put this on girls and boys. It's like, oh, be careful with the girls. Don't let them do anything too rough. Don't be rough with them. Don't hurt them. And it's like, no. Women can box and run marathons and stuff like that. There's no need. We can just have honest conversations. Yeah. But I will defend who I was speaking to last night a little bit.
I knew that was coming. I knew it.
I feel this part of me that has to defend. We were actually just talking about difficult conversations with partners in general. There wasn't necessarily a gender, but as we were talking about the men, we were talking about that. It's like actually what my partner introduced me to many years ago was the shit sandwich. Say something nice, then give them the shit, and then finish off with nice, because it's a nice way for many men and women to hear difficult things.
Again, though, I would counteract that is a bit condescending. I would really. I don't think you need to give a shit sandwich. This is not the boardroom. You just need to be able to sit down with somebody, look them in the eye, and have a difficult conversation. You don't need to butter them up with a compliment or talking about them nicely. I think if you've got a really honest and open and very conscious relationship, then the ideal is to be able to say things. You don't have to pussyfoot around someone. I think the idea that women are emotional and sensitive is seen as something that is to be it to you kind of you're treading on eggshells, and you're worried about what you're going to say in order to, you know, instigate this kind of emotionality. Emotions are our strength, you know. Men have just as many different emotions as we do. Sometimes that manifests just slightly differently. You know, if we're talking about toxic masculinity, it will manifest in terms of anger. That's still an emotion. You know, we're all emotional beings, and I think we get this label that we're sensitive, but I would strongly argue, a lot stronger than men, because of what we have to go through, because of, you know, growing and making a human is one of the strongest things you can ever do. So I think this kind of notion of weakness or treading carefully around difficult conversations doesn't really resonate with me. It might resonate with some other women. I can't speak for all women. We're all different. But yeah, I think that's my little rant.
And I say on the emotionality of men and women, I definitely saw a study not too long ago, and I can't remember the exact details, and it talked about, you know, it's challenging this idea that men are less emotional than women. And they went through a load of questions and so forth, and they found zero evidence of this, zero evidence
that
of any
doesn't
different.
surprise me.
And like you said, when it comes to toxic masculinity, there's a wonderful talk I saw by a guy called Connor Beaton. He has a round table. And there's a movie called The Work. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's where these guys, they go in and do men's work inside a maximum security prison in California.
Ooh, that sounds like my kind of program.
It's very good. And one of the guys who was facilitating and was a prisoner was on this panel. And he said, the problem for men is that there's only really two emotions that we're allowed to express publicly. And those are anger and lust.
For real. Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of men, because they don't even get to express sadness in any way, they might be feeling sadness, but it comes out as anger because that's the one that in society that we allow for men. And it's really the work for men and society is for me, in my opinion, there's a big part of combating toxic masculinity is just allowing these other expressions of emotions for men to be allowed in public without being mocked, without being called various names and so forth, without memes being created about them, and just simply saying, oh yeah, this is a guy that's feeling something just like I feel stuff too.
So David, let me ask you a question. When was the last time that you cried?
I think the last time I cried, it was last year in May.
Wow.
Because I cried a lot that week. I did a men's retreat for 5 days with 24 other men. And we went through various processes, which really brought up a lot. And I saw men share themselves so vulnerably about things that have happened to them, horrible acts that have been done to them that they hadn't shared before, and saw them cry. And I really saw part of me in them, and I saw their pain and I understood their pain. And I also understood the layers around their pain that stops them from discussing it because they don't want to be seen a certain way. And I think I probably cried maybe 5 or 6 times that week.
So I mean, that's a really big kind of, that would bring anyone to tears. Okay. I probably cry. I definitely wouldn't go 1 week without crying. I cry empathetically all the time. I cry watching telly a lot. I cry when I'm happy sometimes. I'm surprised that I'm surprised that you haven't cried more, or that you don't cry more. So I'm not going to shame you about that, though. I am interested in because of the work you do, I'm interested in how you're able to express sadness, and whether you're still struggling and fighting with expressing those other emotions that are notoriously, men are told not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I hold a lot of space for men, like a lot, on a weekly basis. And it's not uncommon for me to sit with a man and for him to cry to me. And I think because I'm holding that space, I also try and be as clear as possible for them to express whatever's there for them. So how do I express my sadness? Talking. I'm quite lucky. I have a wonderful partner who really listens to me. Sometimes I'll come out of a session, a podcast, it can be a coaching session, and I feel people very deeply. Like it hits me in the heart and my stomach, and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I empathize very easily.
Yes.
With any situation, and sometimes this can really rile people. For instance, even with things that are not in my values. I can empathize with racists sometimes, because I'm like, you're scared of me. You're scared of my existence troubles you.
Yeah.
And that must be really difficult for you. So I empathize with people a lot. So I think the best way for me is really talking. Talking is the thing that I do. I listen and I talk. Crying, there's times in my life when it's come a lot easier to me than other times. I can think of a time when I was traveling through South America, and I just spent, I went and did some plant medicine in Peru. Then I spent 6 months just connecting with people very directly, very honestly. And I could be moved, just like you said, I remember sitting on buses, watching a series called Roots. And I would just sit there and just cry on the bus, and old men next to me would always be like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm fine. It's just so brutal. And I do see that, like everybody, like I really admit for myself that would I like more access to expressions of sadness and despair and depression? Definitely. There's still work for me to do. And I'm always pushing myself to do more of that work, because I don't think there's a place that I could come to and go, I'm done. I'm feeling my emotions. No. I can definitely go further, and I'm in the work of doing that as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I'm really pleased that you have that outlet and you're able to talk about your emotions with somebody. I find, if we're going back to tears, I find it such a lovely release for me, very healing, and I feel sad that men haven't got that as easily. They haven't got access to that as easy as we do. It's a real benefit. It really is.
I must say I feel envious of my girlfriend, because she's able to, like yourself, to release the tears a lot easier. I kind of go to practices of movement, like shaking, even dancing, breath work. I do quite a lot of breath work, and I find that's a really great way to bring up any emotion that's been stagnant in the body. It's a great way to release.
I went on a Kundalini retreat last year. God, that was incredible. It was incredible for bringing up all the emotions. I would literally be in the practice and I wouldn't even realize that tears were streaming down my face. Lots and lots of emotional releasing, and it was incredible. So I'm a big fan of breath work.
It's very powerful work.
It is.
The last question I was going to ask you actually was along this line.
Go for it.
Of some of the things that that you've gone through and practices that you either have or you've done along your healing journey that have really helped you, that you recommend to other people.
There's lots and lots and lots. I think I've come a very long way. I've done a lot of healing, particularly in the last couple of years. I think it's been on steroids in the last couple of years, my healing. I would say my first thing was therapy, but obviously that's not accessible to everyone. But I had a woman therapist who was just incredible. She also told me about, well, she basically diagnosed me with ADHD, which led me down a path of lots more healing and self-understanding. I've just dropped a little nugget there at the end of the session, but that's another day. And daily practice of meditation. I feel it, like literally just 10 minutes a day in the morning is usually all I have time for. Not, I could do longer, but I feel like my concentration levels, 10 minutes a day is good for me. And that's accessible to anyone. Just sitting and being still and alone with your thoughts, even if you don't practice the meditation aspect, is unbelievably transformational. It really is. But it's something that you have to keep up and you have to do every day in order for it. Because, I have fallen into that habit of going, oh, I'm fine now. Everything's fine. I don't need to meditate anymore. And then boom, something will happen and I will act like an absolute CUNT. And I'm like, oh shit, like I'm never going to be healed. This is something that I have to work on forever. And I've just bought a dip tank. I've just bought for that cold water exposure thing. Oh God, I'm now questioning my choices because it's bloody cold in England. And I'm like, I've just ordered a ton of ice. And I'm like, oh God, am I really going to do this? But you know what? I've heard so many amazing benefits of cold water therapy. And I think that's what they call it. And, there's lots of mental health benefits and the way it helps us cope with stress and your immune system benefits and all that. So that's another thing that I'm going to start trying. And obviously, I talked about a retreat I went on, Kundalini yoga has been really incredible for me. I had a bit of an out of body experience when I went on this retreat, and I felt like I felt very disconnected before then. It was I think there was some PTSD going on. There was just in general, I had protected myself because feeling was too overwhelming for me. So I just, if you had asked me a couple of years ago when the last time I cried, I would be very similar to you and say it was about a year ago. Now I have access to those emotions because I've connected my mind and my body again. So, I mean, that brings the good and the bad, but at least, I went in with that intention and that's what I came out with. So, yeah, I think I would say that therapy, meditation, and just that self-awareness. Journaling. I do a lot of journaling. Journaling's been incredible for me in terms of self-awareness. And just talking deep with anyone and everyone as much as I can, and trying to learn from people, trying to listen. I love podcasts. I love audiobooks. Trying to just get as much information as I can.
Beautiful. I can definitely resonate with a lot of those. Like I've seen a therapist for the last couple of years, and it's been amazing to have someone to, unpick some thoughts and histories and pasts. And I've been a big fan of meditation for a number of years. I've been lucky enough to go and do like a 10-day silent retreat, which I can't recommend more highly, to get really, really deep into a practice, but a meditation practice every day. And like you said, it's accessible to everybody. Everyone can do a daily meditation practice. You can find 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day to do that. And it doesn't cost you anything. You just need to sit down or lie down even, but sitting down is preferable.
Yeah.
And like you said, the journaling as well. That's another one that's free. You can find so many journaling prompts online, in books.
Yeah, it's great.
You can just do, and like you said, cold showers and dips. I look forward to a photo. I look forward to a photo of you in your cold dip tank.
Yeah, we'll see.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for those. So much wisdom, so much openness, so much vulnerability, so much wonder. You have this wonderful kind of curiosity and wonder about how you move and how you speak. And just say a big thank you to you.
Thank you. You really got me to think, and I can't wish for anything better. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure the guests are wondering where they can hear more from you, when your book's going to be out, when they can get their hands on it.
Yeah, so my book, Feeling Myself, is out in June. I think it's June the 9th. You can pre-order it now, though. So I would love it if you can put my link somewhere. Pre-orders are really important in terms of the future success of the book. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm shitting myself. It's all of the above and everything, but I'm just mostly really fucking proud of it. It was a lot of hard work, and yeah, I'm really, really proud of myself.
Wonderful. And people can find you on...
So you can find me at Style Me Sunday, on Instagram, on Facebook. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. And I look forward to listening back to this, because it was a lot of fun to record, and I'm sure the listeners have enjoyed. And I always like to say at the end is, if you've taken any tidbits and tips or things that you can take into your life and change, I'm sure myself and Natalie would love to hear from you. There's nothing better than hearing from real people that have created real change from, the words that have been spoken or our experience that's been shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy. I would love to hear what you think of this episode. So yeah, and I can carry on the debate anywhere in my DM. Happy to. But yeah, it was a really interesting conversation. So thanks for having me, David.
Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, listeners, for listening. And I will check you next week. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.